a few times I'm non-inclusive, but I will start with saying that the three secretaries here and I have something in common. We are all UP School of Economics. And I'm sure like me, always a proud scholar ng bayan. Scholar ng bayan, or in the case of my colleagues here, professors, which is my frustration, by the way, to teach not in the School of Economics, but in the College of Law. Anyway, starting on that good note, I know we are in good company. As Alan has said, as I have also made public, I'm very happy to see this economic team. Heads up, I think some of my questions can be dissected in my committee on the Sustainable Development Goals. I was just very excited to move forward our newly titled Bicycle and Walkable Cities Act, which was formerly the Safe Pathway. So inuna ko yon because we already passed it in the last Congress before the briefing. But hopefully during the break, I would welcome briefing. Yusek Rose was a steady, was a fixture in our hearings because I'm really very target-based. No? I'd like us to be able to show the people how when we have such a policy, this will result in this kind of outcome. And I think the SDGs make it quite clear. There's no reason to really reinvent the rules. Ambition 2040 is consistent with that. The framework is consistent. So, Mr. Chairman, I will not burden this committee with those details. I'm happy to have those hearings. And I can even make it a joint because I am Senior Vice Chair of the Finance Committee. So we can...
If I may, Senator P, I just want to say Senator P has been very consistent and a pioneer in this respect. And in fact, she inserted such provisions in Bayanihan, in the budgets every year. And in fact, if you look at some of our roads now, they're already bike lanes, which weren't there before. So that's a result of some of the fruits of her labor.
You. And for the record also, we already have agencies that have futures thinking offices. This was a product also of my observations in pioneering countries like Singapore and Finland. In fact, I think that's where I will be going during our break during session to Futures Thinking Conference in Finland. So our Department of Education has a Futures Thinking office. The NEDA has a Sustainable Development office. DOH has a Futures Thinking office. But my efforts are useless, even with all the support of my colleagues, my chairman, are useless if the agencies of government are not on board. No? So I may pinpoint agencies that I feel they need it in particular, but what I really need is a whole of government, a whole of society approach to get us in this frame of mind. On that note, I'll start with my first illustration. No? I'm basically going to try to adapt what I'd like to hear from our esteemed resource persons, no? The secretaries and their team. I'll do the same. I want to illustrate it in a way na I understand it and the average person can understand it. So, clear naman po sa atin lahat na ambition natin 2040 and the medium-term framework embraces sustainable development and the importance of education and health. So I will limit my discussion there given the time constraints also. Basic education, classrooms. So we are bombarded with news on the shortage of classrooms, no? Classrooms itself will not solve our education problems, but obviously it is a component. The number that we are looking at is 40. That is not ideal, but that is what we're living with right now. So let's use 40. I'm not happy with that number because I grew up, my mom is a teacher. My chairman's mother is also a teacher. Kung pwedeng 20, and when we look at advanced countries, not only do their teachers have master's degrees, but they also have small classroom sizes. So, but anyway, we're living with 40 for purpose of discussion, and I'll ask my team now to put on the my visual aid, no, on for everyone to see. So basically, the DepEd tells us that we have 127,039 classrooms. We need 127,039 classrooms. We are waiting for that slide to appear, but you can listen na lang to my numbers. This is from DepEd, I didn't make this up. That budget at 2.5 per classroom is 317.6 billion. So, for people listening, baka meron, baka wala, natin alam. I'm not saying that we have to spend for this all this year, obviously, and the absorptive capacity is not going to be there. So I made a chart, which I hope at some point today will appear. I made a chart showing how much we have to spend if we want to fulfill the classroom shortage within this term of President Marcos' administration. In 6 years, that will cost us 52.93 million. That's 21,000 classrooms over the span of 6 years. Kung gawin natin 10, which is just an easier number to divide, then that's 31.76 billion for 12,000 classrooms per year. And if we use the number that was allocated in this budget, that's 5.3 billion, that's 2,117 classrooms, that will take 60 years. Unless there are innovations in healthcare, malamang unless there is like a 20-year-old research assistant here, wala na tayong lahat nun. Okay? May I know what the problem is with the slides? Oh, Mr. Chairman, nagpapaalam pa daw ma-allow yung slide. Sayang naman yung effort ko na gumawa ng slide.
Allowed na po.
Allowed na. Okay. Anyway, I'm talking to numbers people. I'm sure you understood what I was saying, pero at some point we'll flash a slide. So it's a choice we have to make. Do we want to attain this objective of having classrooms or do we not? Because for me, let's be honest with the Filipino people. Kami naman, it's our job din naman to make that happen. So do we want to achieve it? And if you say 20 years, then it's 20 years. But let's have a goal. Let's have a target. Now, I also happen to be a proud mother of a recent architect board passer of UP School of, what do they call it? Arki. Ano ba tawag nila doon? Arki, A-R-K-I. College or school, not sure. I mentioned that because I was messaged by the former dean that along with DOST, they have already provided the framework of model resilient classrooms and resilient everything else. For the purpose of this discussion, Mr. Chairman, classrooms. And no one has bothered to check. Anyway, I bring that to your attention so that we can make use of these valuable tools that we already have. Okay, so I'll move on. No, I think I've made my point. I just want a decision because I will chair, God willing, that the chairman keeps his trust in me. I will chair the budget of DepEd for the next 3 years, and I want to know what's our direction. I won't bother you here, but I can submit it to you. Using very basic foresight tools, I proposed a higher budget for classrooms. That's called the BEF, no? Basic Education Facilities. During the pandemic, why? Syempre, there's time. We need time to build the classrooms. And sadly, the reaction I got, pandemic naman ngayon, hindi natin kailangan. O hindi natin kailangan ngayon, hindi man matatayo yan bukas. By the time na matayo yan, papasok na yung mga bata. And then, so where are we? Yan, wala nang classroom. Because we didn't even take advantage when we could. And I wish former chairman of the committee, former chairman of chairman, secretary of DPWH was still here because when I was online, he was here, no? Briefly. He gave very specific numbers on their absorptive capacity. And the division of labor between DepEd on the identification per LGU, on the site preparation, nandun na lahat. So we're able to do that. So if it turns out the absorptive capacity is maybe a little bit more pa than the 10 years, the 12,000 classrooms, no? O di we make it 15 years. Pero siguro naman, wag naman 60 years. Because this is where we are, okay? So I'll move on, and so that, for economies of time, I'll allow the secretaries and their team to answer later on whatever response they want to give. This one is less detailed. No, I don't have a slide for this, but there was just a news item, Mr. Chairman, that coming from CHED, no, that they will not be able to fund new beneficiaries using the TESS fund. This is the tertiary education subsidy because walang funding for that. I am going to have my briefing with CHED and then the formal hearing. I will be prepared to give you more details later. Beyond that statement, I haven't gotten more details, but it is what it is, no? I would assume that the chairman is telling the truth, of course. So, walang funding for that. So, unless, and sometimes it happens, nalipat pala sa ganito, but he would know. Diba? So, I need to assume regularity in the pronouncement that there are no new funds for the tertiary education subsidy. On that note, another thing that I've been a big proponent of is the need for us to sometimes take the maybe not politically popular position, but we need to help steer the youth towards the courses that we want them to take. I'm trying to be politically correct by saying steer, no? Hindi naman i-deny. But the reality is there are courses that we want more students enrolling in, and there are courses that we have too many and we don't need more of them. So obviously the scholarship should be there. Yun naman ang job ng ating mga agencies, no? Unifas,
Been trying for agriculture, but no takers.
yeah, yeah.
Colleges, we have a lot of scholarships, but there are no takers.
No takers because when they see naman the lives of their parents, Mr. Chairman, di ba, it's not something to look forward to. But I heard some good news. I don't know if I heard this through Ambassador Tess de Vega or some other source. Now they're looking at a program with Korea, no, to show how innovations in agriculture. I actually saw a news item that young people educated are going back to the provinces in Korea because there are opportunities for agriculture. So anyway, that's just a second item I wanted to share. The third is more specific. My colleagues here are all co-sponsors of this measure, Doktor Para sa Bayan. So I believe this was initially conceived as just scholarships for the doctors. But with all humility, no, I studied it very carefully and I said, we can't just do scholarships. The universities offering these programs don't have the absorptive capacity. You can talk about doubling the enrollment. They don't have classrooms. They don't have laboratories. They don't have professors to teach even 20% more. So the law became quite comprehensive. It now includes MOE and PS and capital outlay because I called the major schools. I called PGH. I said, what's your absorptive capacity right now? I forgot the answer, but maybe it was 10% at most. But we want more. We want more. So we have to support it. So now, as it stands, in the 2022 budget, the amount provided for medical scholarship was 250 million. And there's another 250 million that is a congressional insertion based on the numbers. You have to assume that we do our homework. No? So we computed and put a random 250 there. We computed how many scholars do we want to fund and we put in another 250 because those are the number of scholars we need to have to achieve a specific goal, which is the number of doctors to the population. But it is a congressional insertion. So come 2023, wala na siya because of the general rule na bawal ang congressional insertion. O so paano? Hindi na mafa-fund yun. You know what I mean? Like I know there is a general rule and there is a reason for those rules. But we need to be able to have a system where you dissect, we ask you to look at it and see if it's worthwhile to continue because otherwise, every year we waste time and energy proposing this insertion all over again when it's continuing funding for the education, for a 4-year medical education. I think I make that quite clear, no? So no need for me to move on. I mean, I can move on. My next example is on health. I had the opportunity to mention this, Mr. Chairman, during my opening statement, but I'd like to show a slide, which is actually just a news article. Okay, so I'll give our esteemed guest a few seconds to read that. Okay, so what that slide basically says is in the US FDA banned 55,000 flavors. These are not companies, flavors. So coming out of how many companies, I don't know, 50,000 flavors were banned by the FDA. And here in the Philippines, FDA, technically by virtue of the law passed by Congress and not vetoed by this administration, there will be no FDA that will monitor the flavors that are entering this market. Now, in the previous administration, from DepEd to DOH to FDA, all agencies were on board. Even the Department of Finance, former Secretary Sonny Dominguez strongly urged the veto of this measure. So where are we now? It's a law. So I asked my esteemed colleagues from UP School of Economics, health economics is equally important. What do we do now? The law says DTI is the lead agency and will consult FDA. So what leeway do we have? I will have a briefing with DOH because I will defend the budget of DOH. I will find out what they want to do. But DTI is the lead agency. So with one hand, you are going to fund hospitalization. I am a proponent for more funding for PhilHealth for the out of hospital. It's called Consulta because we need to be preventive healthcare in approach. Pero maglalagay tayo ng pondo doon, but on the other hand, we are deregulating an industry. It doesn't make sense, right? Doesn't make sense. And at the very least, let's be logical in our approach to the use of our funding. So I will move on. And I'm almost ending, Mr. Chairman. As I said, these are just examples, no? COVID-19 benefits. Again, there's been a lot of news on that not enough funding has been provided. I am aware that there is a change in directions on COVID response, but I think we deserve to understand and also be able to explain. And I think there are backlogs pa in benefits that were supposed to be given. So that has to be explained din naman, Mr. Chairman. And I think that's about it. I probably have triple the number of examples that I want to share, but I'm very conscious of time, Mr. Chairman, as you know that. Maybe a few responses on this, and then I'll see if I'll ask.
The responses are not counted against your time, Your Honor.
Thank you.
So, and I'm reminded of my wife when I listen to you and Senator Aimee, because they have all the questions and they have all the answers also. So, but anyway, we'll give the resource persons a chance to respond. There's a lot there, so you can choose to respond to whichever portion. There's something about the e-cigarettes. There's about the education. What are the other ones?
Mostly policy anyway. You know,
Yeah,
like I said, I
policy, yeah.
use them as examples.
Ah.
You can counter with a different example, but at some point I'll go back with in
Yung point niya about maybe DBM secretary can respond to
On the-
about the congressional insertions, perhaps at some point being part of the NEP already, because it's a continuing appropriation or a continuing need. Kasi it doesn't make sense. You fund the scholarship for 2 years and then suddenly you don't fund the third and fourth year. What will happen to the students, diba? Something like that, no?
If I may, Mr. Chair, for the school buildings, I can just perhaps share of course, we all know that their utilization and the disbursement and obligation rate is really quite low. In fact, for 2021, the obligation rate, the obligation rate is 92%. The disbursement is only 45%. This is for 2021 alone. So I guess for
No,
2022.
to be clear, we're referring to DPWH, right? I mean,
Yes.
for the record, because they're the ones tasked to roll out, no?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
sorry, I forgot to mention, Mr. Chairman. Of course, we're cognizant of the Mandanas ruling that also, threw us a monkey wrench when we were trying to push for the funding. I think what we did for 2022 is fund the 4th and 5th class, but I understand the Vice President Secretary wants to fund everything. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yes, ma'am. And then per submission also from the Department of Education, as of December 31, 2021, they reported that there are only 191 constructed classrooms for 2021, while there are still 15,000 classrooms ongoing from 2014 to 2021. So when we
Sige.
craft the budget,
Para klaro.
yeah, when we craft the budget,
Klaro lang.
klaro daw.
WFP lang sa FDD.
May we remind our resource persons to close their computers/party lines. Go ahead, Sec. No.
So, Mr. Chair, given the low absorptive capacity and the implementation efforts of the agencies po, we take that into consideration in preparing the budget. Well, we understand po that we need more classrooms to be constructed. I think Secretary Jokno, we discussed this a few weeks ago. We have a parang strategy po on how to work about so that in the coming years po, we'll be able to, I think your projection, ma'am, is right. Maybe we can do some sort of a projection in the next 6 years so that we'll be able to reduce the backlogs. Secretary Jokno, if we can share po the strategy that you have.
Of course. And
Well,
you
we're
mentioned that already
actually-
in devolution. Maybe you could
Yeah, we're
touch on
actually
that. Yeah.
thinking of the use of prefab for construction. And also, instead of contracting out individual schools. You contract a lot. Let's say it's one contractor for the whole province, right? So that I think that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you for that. The fact that you have had this discussion is already assuring to me because, Your Honors, the concern here really has been me being the chairman, the vice chairman in charge of their budget. I'm like an arbiter. DPWH, DepEd, DPWH, DepEd. You know, so since now, and not just now, actually, even the past administration, it's clearly covered by the vision, then I would really appreciate if the economic team, you know, is looking, overseeing this whole thing and ensuring that we get it done. Because then otherwise it gets left behind. And I really would like to be moving forward in the next few. So I won't argue with the numbers that you have. I will be happy to supply you with figures if I get different ones when I meet with the different agencies. But in the meantime, I would be happy if you can give me a timeline when we can, you know, when you have the resources that you need to really come up with these projections. I think that will give assurance to a lot of people.
Mr. Chair, just to share lang an experience. I remember this is a perennial problem with DepEd when it comes to construction of classrooms. I remember before when, and I have to give credit, when Secretary Pinoy, sa DBM, he's under the Aquino administration, Butch Abad, no? He had this program. I think it's quite effective. It's a counterparting. So, for example, DepEd will give 50% of the funds, the LGU will give 50% of the funds, but the LGU builds. So, in effect, you now have thousands of LGUs simultaneously building. Because right now it's centralized. It's all DepEd building. So what he did is, okay, you put 50%, I'll put 50%, can be in form of land, kasi land is also scarce in Metro Manila, can be form of funds, but you build. So you use the back of the LGU, and then the LGU constructs, but DepEd, of course, monitors the quality, monitors the specifications. But the concept there is to decentralize construction because the construction part is the bottleneck. No? The bidding part is the bottleneck. Now, just to share with the group on some
And
concept.
if the problem is land acquisition, the local government is usually more efficient in that respect. So
I
that's a
may
very
also-
good. That's a very good point.
If
Go ahead,
I
Sir.
may also share during that time, since you mentioned the experience during the Aquino administration, Mr. Chair, that we did a PPP for classroom construction at the time, and quite so that you can have quite a massive construction going on all at the same time. I think that there is something like maybe this kind of a hybrid that the SecBen is mentioning, that you know you can use that facility and together with I think there's really from a economic and social perspective, I would think as a social planner that investment in human capital like this is quite superior, has superior returns compared to other forms of infrastructure. And it needs a pain to see that over the years we haven't addressed that critical component of our human capital build up. So I guess I came from I started my school in very remote areas where I can relate to this access issue, and so I think that 6 years with 51 billion, so that should be very doable. I think if we can just refocus our efforts.
Mr. Chairman, may I just add
Yes, please,
to add
Secretary
perspective
Ben.
on our problem with education?
Yes, sir.
You know? Of course, school building is a problem, but my understanding in education is that 60% of the performance of the student is explained by the quality of the teachers. I think we should also focus on reskilling, upskilling, retooling our teachers. Okay.
So one of the focus points of our chairperson of Basic Education, Senator Win.
May I just expound on
Please,
that?
please.
Our chairman, in the last Congress, we passed Teachers Excellence Act. So during the briefing on the budget, and of course you're welcome to attend in the hearing, I hope that's, sabi nga niya wala pang IRR. But we also need funding for that because I also prefaced my whole discussion on classroom acknowledging that it's not the main issue, no, but we still need classrooms. It's really the quality of education. So that one, we need serious funding. And that goes into so many issues. Again, we won't have time, maybe sa committee na lang. But like, I know a lot of LGUs in far-flung areas would want to put up a teaching school. That's usually the first course, one of the first course offered, di ba, in mga local LUCs. And then, but the question is the quality. Kasi magagaling ba yung nagtuturo doon, di ba? And the passing rate, we have to look at all of those. So anyway, we're happy that we're having this discussion, Your Honor. Maybe a response on the health issue, no? The doctors and the e-cigarette, as I said, is an example, but it's a serious concern. Pulmonary disease is major contributor to health problems that we have to fund.
Mr. Chair, if I may just add po yung the comment of Senator Win. There's an existing study now, technical assistance po that we're currently doing now with ADB. This is the cost sharing policy between the national government and LGUs. This is also consistent with of course, capacity building for the Mandanas ruling that we're going to devolve the functions of social services in the LGUs.
It's not limited to education. It's across the board.
It includes water supply, sanitation, sewage, flood control, roads and project, even tourism and housing.
Okay.
So we'll be happy to share the result of the study once it's finished and completed.
Yeah, just to share also one of the comments of, we also crowdsourced a little bit on the NEP, no? One of the comments of one of the academic groups was not enough resources in water. A lot of infrastructure, but not enough for water, which they say has, I don't know if it's multiplier or multiple effects because you fight disease, but you also provide a basic service. So just that's something to flag going forward. No? Yeah. So if you're done, Senator Pia?
Response on the health.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
And then I just have a
Response on that.
rejoinder which recaps it.
Anyone want to respond? Yeah, Yusek Rose.
Yeah, with the indulgence of my principal. So just want to report that during, I think it was May of, the previous administration, we actually started working with the DOH in finalizing their human resources for health master plan. And when it was presented to the Social Development Committee, we found that there was not much in terms of the numbers, the quantitative part. And so we asked that, we redo it. And this time we worked with them. So it was NEDA, DOH, and then we sought the assistance of the ADB. And so actually right now the study is already finished by and large. It's just that we have to present it to the next batch of the Social Development Committee. So what we have there is actually the in terms of the numbers that we will need. So the nurses, midwives, doctors, BHWs actually, all the way to 2040. Because the problem is this past 3 years, I think, 3 years, we really had a problem in the supply of nurses because of the K-12. There was really that scarcity in the supply of nurses. And we figured that going forward, siguro from now until siguro mga 3 years from now, yung doctors naman na magiging problema natin. Again, also because of the, we added 2 years. So yun, ang tinitingnan na namin kung ano yung kailan mangyayari ito, and so what will be our, what should be our policy response. But with respect to that, so yun, meron na kami nung yung forecast in terms of the number that we will need, and also in terms of the training cost for this human resources for health. We're happy to share it once we have presented it to the SDC.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that was how I was going to end my question, but I still need an answer on vapes, no? I just want somebody to respond to this
No one has
because
responded
it
to
goes
vape.
back to everything in Ambition 2040. I was going to say that one of the, and I think it might have been the first committee report I reported out in the 13th Congress between 2004 and 2010, was the management of human resources due to the influx, the demand for nurses abroad. What we don't have, dear secretaries, are a multi-sectoral and a multi-agency, whether it's a task force or, a group that is managing this. So if it's just DOH crunching the numbers on what the need is, somebody should also be crunching the numbers on how many we lose. So we're producing this much, how many leave, and how do we manage that? And I'll dig up that committee report. I'll ask my team to look at it. It's an official document. It's a Senate committee report. There were recommendations at that time on bilateral agreements or even private agreements between, let's say, the city of San Francisco and St. Paul University. I mentioned St. Paul because they are a major producer pala of nurses. So it can be tackled so many ways, but we need to have those agreements in place so that we have some way of managing, no? So for every demand, every 10 nurses they get, fund a nurse who will take up a masteral program. For every 100, put up a building. There were programs like that. Poland apparently did that in Europe because of the demand for their nurses. So I've mentioned this so many times, but nothing from the administration has really come out of it. So if you could take a look at this, if NEDA will take the lead, whoever, but that, because that involves DOH predicting the demand, DOLE or now DOFL managing or looking at the exodus, and NEDA probably. So we need to do that because otherwise we'll never be able to manage it because we will be a human resource sending country, I think, for now, for the next generation, because we're great at what we do. So we have to manage it. Yun lang. And then maybe, inunahan mo na yung response because you're going in that direction. But yun nga, response sana on the vape issue. And then I'll yield the floor, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone can respond on the vape issue? If there's any views on that? If you're just going to look at each other, I'll assume there's no view.
If there's no view, I'm going to demand the view on the floor so you can think about it because yun nga eh.
You have time to think about your...
The example that, the example I told the chairman I would mention is just when Secretary Pangdaman mentioned that corruption is an issue that they will address, then my brother, no, Senator Alan, spoke, di ba, about possible leakages and really out and out schemes, no, to deprive us of very much needed funding. I was saying that I'm happy that nauna pa, no, ang ating economic team through the secretary to mention that will be addressed. So in the same way, when we give in to lobbies, because I've heard it said, and I'll say what I heard. The tobacco industry is a big contributor to our economy. Okay, it's a contributor. Let them contribute by way of paying taxes, but don't let them make government and people pay more by way of unregulated and not deregulating their activities, which is exactly what happened. So I do expect a response from the economic team because that's funding that you are managing that is being siphoned off in a way that it shouldn't be if we're regulating properly. And in the end, what I expect is a proposal that we regulate that industry and you support the proper legislation that supports it. Otherwise, we're wasting our time. That's what it is. Remember, this is a response to banning these products. During the last Congress, the discussion was, do we ban this as that product has been banned in certain countries? And we decided we do not ban, but we will regulate. Ano nangyari sa regulation? Flew out the window. So yun lang, Mr. Chairman.
Unfortunately, this bill was passed, right? It was just lapsed into law, right?
Yes.
I think there should be another bill tax it
I
heavily,
have, Mr. Secretary.
tax
So
it
if you
heavily,
will-
prohibitively.
So I wait for your recommendation. I have a bill that properly
Actually,
regulates it.
Senator Pia sponsored a bill that would
I did. We
that would
taxed it.
tax
and,
these.
I mean, this is a new team, no? So it's my job to share, no? I don't expect you to know everything that transpired. In the sin tax law, which we passed in 2019, the debate was, do we ban this new product, the e-cigarettes and vapes, or do we regulate? And the decision was, we regulate. We tax and we put in protective health measures that will prevent the youth from being exploited. And at that time, the news was all over that kids in other countries were dying in the hospitals because of abusive use of these products. So what were the regulatory measures we put in? Access will be only for 21 years old. The FDA will regulate, and our flavors will only be tobacco and menthol. That's it. Lahat yun natanggal dun sa vape bill na regulating daw. So at the very least, I want you to be properly informed on this because no less than congressmen and whoever says that we need that law. We don't need it. The sin tax law already provided for those protective measures. So I'm just sharing that information with all of you, no? Because like I said, in one pocket, out another. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Again, Senator P has been very consistent, persistent with that advocacy since day one. And I'd like to take off from her points, if it's okay, to go to talk about a little bit about PhilHealth because there was a pronouncement in the House that PhilHealth will only survive until 2027. Any comments on that? PhilHealth will only survive. The PhilHealth executive said that if things stay the way they are, they will only survive until 2027, which I don't know if that's if a study's been done on that or such study will be done. Just a little worrisome, no?
Where did they get that, ano?
During the House budget hearing. Yeah.
We look at it.
Yeah. If I don't expect
No, but
an off-the-cuff answer.
I think
So
we should put
yeah.
good men in PhilHealth. Not doctors, but finance people.
Okay.
So FYI, I'm trying to look for the descriptive word. Humaba na buhok, pumuti na buhok, tumaas na yung kilay ni former Secretary Sani on that issue, even with a good person he put in there. But yeah, I hope is forever present in government service. So we hope you can really do that, put the right people there to fix it.
Yeah, and maybe just come back to us on what if once you've studied the matter. Yeah, Senator Sherwin, Vice Chair Sherwin, anything on your end? Yeah, I'll just put some. I don't expect answers now because I know you're coming back tomorrow. So I'll just throw out a few questions that you can answer tomorrow. There is. I want to find out who are the 15 provinces for the ECCD you mentioned in your presentation. And then I have a question regarding the OWA, the DMW, the Department of Migrant Workers. There was an item there where there's a 10 billion repatriation fund. Have we, because that's usually, that used to be in a trust fund for OWA, collected from every time the OFWs contribute and become members. Are we now putting that in the GAA? Or, because then it might lose its quality, its quality as a special fund that's earmarked specifically for Inang Rico. So I'm curious if that's the case, no? Again, you don't have to answer it immediately. You can answer it tomorrow, and then maybe I'll give the secretaries a chance to answer that PGH issue because there was, of course, it was when the NEP was released. One of the first items that binandera sa news is that you cut the budgets of UP and PGH. I think, well, first of all, it's unfair because they're comparing the 2022 GAA, which is the final product of the budgetary process, with the 2023 NEP, which is only at the very start or the infancy of the debate. So, and we know that things change along the way. No? So that's number one. But number two, maybe you can talk about what it was that you didn't, that wasn't funded, because there are such things as you know, Sec Ben, you've been in DBM, Sec RC, yung ano yung recurring at non-recurring items, di ba? Because I think the Senate, led by Senator Pia, Senator Sherwin, you funded on the request of Dr. Gap, Director Legaspi, some of the non-recurring capital equipment items. So I just like to place that on record because as a whole, parang that was put in all the newspapers, etc. So parang it created the impression that we don't care about education and health. When the truth is, if you analyze, you look at the numbers, education is up, health is up. So I just wanted to put that on the floor. So we correct some misimpressions.
Mr.
Your Honor.
Chairman,
Yeah.
may I add to that?
Yes, please.
I've always said that in health and education, naghahabol tayo, no? Similar to what I said in my opening statement, naghahabol tayo. So when an item in let's use PGH as an example, no, has been completed, hindi na ba madadagdagan yun? Then we have something else to complete. So kung ang napondohan is the emergency ward, and then next time naman it's the pediatrics, and next time, di ba, naka-line up naman yung mga programs nila. So it also makes the public feel good about us na automatic na rin yung funding sa next na naka-line up na project. And these agencies naman, from what I know, Mr. Chairman, naka-prepare naman yung wish list nila. So, you know, parang when I hear that was for one particular project, it's done. And I'm like, so what? We wait 2 more congresses for another project? You know, let's, like I said, we should have targets. So if we say for higher education, this is the capital outlay that we need, no? X billion over the next administration, 6 years. Oh, then we spread that out. And Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, spread it out, in the sciences, and so on and so forth. Kasi that's what we really need to do. And I'll give you an example, again, close to my heart. Secretaries, I hope that you can relate to this also. When I was in the School of Economics and later on in the College of Law, I would jog around the academic oval and sometimes in the track oval. When my daughters, so that was 1981 to 1991 when I was in college and law school. When my eldest daughter went to college, that was 2012, that's when I found out that it's the same track oval. Okay, yung butas, yung pa rin, butas-butas. So when they run, napipilayan yung teammates, and thank God, never napilayan anak ko, no? They get sprained because butas-butas yung field. Anyway, through our collective efforts, during the time that my daughter was a football player, we got it funding. Pero sa sobrang inefficiency ng contractor, nag-graduate na siya, and I had to fund them to play in, thanks to Mr. Kevin Tan, all the way here in BGC in McKinley. They would go there twice a week to train because their track oval was uprooted. Anyway, my next daughter became a player. Thank God before siya nag-graduate, and I wish I could show you because it's beautiful. Maybe tomorrow, Mr. Chairman, I'll flash it. Nakalaro na siya dun sa magandang field na yon. And just today, the dean sent me. So tapos na, nakalaro na siya doon, nakagraduate na rin siya. Tapos ngayon, bawal na ulit. Doon sila sa sunken garden na, kaya nga sunken garden kasi nalulubog at pag inulan, hindi ka makalaro. Lipat sila sa sunken garden. Text ako sa dean, bakit nalipat na naman yung training sa sunken garden? Kasi yung track oval, yun naman yung inaayos ngayon, patawarin. And then tinawagan ko si UP President Danny Concepcion. He fired the contractor kasi palpak. They start all over again. Siguro naka-PhD na yung mga anak ko bago matapos to. Anyway, I use them as an example. I wasn't biased, to be fair, ha? We funded the stadiums, we funded baseball, you know, all. But I stress this point because Secretary Balisacan mentioned that he grew up, you know, in a far-flung area, and education there may not have been as great as education here. But UP and many other SUCs, Mr. Chairman, my experience is just UP, so I speak of UP, but other universities, SUCs as well, give these young people the opportunity. So during the pandemic, I adopted 3 of their teammates from different parts of the country. They live with me. Awa ng Diyos. Nag-graduate yung 2 during the pandemic. Yung isa, goalkeeper ng UP football. Tita, wala pa rin akong dorm. Freaking commutes from my home in Alabang to UP. So text na naman ako sa dean. Bakit naman walang dorm? Wala pa rin. Kulang ang dorm. You know what I mean? And then if I try to put that in the budget, my FLR kasi wala sa ano. So that is the reality. These young people from these far-flung areas can't even study properly. Pipilitan ng online. Sabihin natin, thankfully, may online. Yeah, but it's not the way to study. They should be in school. So anyway, I rest my case. Thank
If
you.
I may interject, I think correct me if I'm wrong, Sec Ben, Sec Mina, no? During your time at DBM, you never implemented a policy similar to FLR or for later release. I mean, as long as it was in the GAA, you would release it, right? So I think that's a very good argument for your.
Wala daw sa
Aside from your
vocabulary-
confirmation, you're also your.
Wala daw sa
The passage of their
vocabulary
budget.
ni Sec Mina yon. Wala daw sa ano nila, glossary of definitions.
That's most commendable because it kind of it finds agreement with lawmakers, you know. So, and a last thing I'd like to place there, unless you want to talk about the PGH, no more. I just place that on record, no. That one about ano. But last point that you can answer tomorrow is yung sa balance of trade natin. I notice it's growing a lot, no. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I'm just worried, you know, we're talking about all sectors kind of increasing and everything, manufacturing, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just wondering if that's something to be worried about, since SecRC mentioned that the balance of trade and services is growing, but in trade and goods the deficit there is growing. So I'm just wondering if you want to, you don't have to answer it now, but you're welcome to if you wish. Oh, Yes.
Through imports of goods and services, particularly goods, outpace the exports of goods and services. But that's not unusual in a rapidly growing emerging economy because you are quite dependent on capital-intensive goods that support construction, for example. Like cement, we import a lot of cement, we import a lot of intermediate goods for our emerging industries. So it's not unusual. What is unusual is our ability to improve the competitiveness of our exports is making that growth of exports of goods slow. But what has grown quite fast is the exports of services through your BPOs. I think that's the one that is helping us. All right, that's the one that's helping us. The other thing that why we should not be so worried about that is that the sources of remittances of dollars, which we use to finance our development, our imports, have been so increasingly diversified. Before, in the 70s, 80s, I remember I was writing on economic development in the Philippines. The major exports were just, you can count coconut, abaca.
Very raw and very unsophisticated or not complex at all. Yeah.
And a lot of borrowing. Those were the only sources of dollars that you have. But today, it's much more diversified.
Okay.
You have the BPOs, you have remittances, you have trade of goods, services, you have investment, you have tourism, and so it's you have to look at this bigger picture because that's what is important. It's not so much about. In fact, I'm so worried if we focus too much on bilateral trade that you try to to formulate policy on the basis of our exports to X country versus their imports.
I know we're talking about not bilateral, but trade as a whole, the balance of trade as a whole. So with the whole world, with the rest of the world.
Yeah,
isn't that an index of your competitiveness, Secretary?
Yeah. As I said, it's not so unexpected. It's not unexpected for an emerging country like us that imports so much on capital for our development. But if our efforts are successful, those initial importations should lead into better competitiveness for our exports. And that's when exports will pick up. And in fact, that's the kind of story that you get from other countries like Vietnam.
Is that what happened in Vietnam, in Indonesia,
right.
for instance?
Yeah.
Countries which
Exactly.
I think, looking at some of the recent data, they have been experiencing surpluses in their trade.
Yeah. And they diversify as a result of the improvements in their basic services.
Okay, let's hope so. That's the case.
We'll
Second,
give,
yes.
we'll give you
Before you answer, I'd like to acknowledge one of the committee vice
we'll give you a
chairpersons,
complete briefing
Senator
tomorrow.
Mark Villar.
Yes.
Yeah,
On that.
tomorrow, it's
And
fine, or in the future.
The widening trade
Yeah,
gap really
yeah.
is explained by number one, our strong growth, and number two is
Yeah.
the high prices of oil.
Okay.
That's basically it.
Basically it. Okay, okay. Yeah, I'll turn it over to,
Okay.
Amy, then
Yeah.
maybe Senator Mark, Senator
Sure.
Amy. Yeah.
I just have a few questions. If we're going through the second round, I would just like to inquire about the agricultural sector. Much of the assistance is being focused through the registry system of basic sectors in agriculture, RSBSA, which is long outdated. What agency is actually responsible for the maintenance and updating of said RSBSA? Is there actually a budget item somewhere for the updating of such, since it is clearly old and inoperable? And then, of course, following that, we've had the problem, surely with the departments, even more so than Congress, of aligning all these lists, RSBSA, listahanan of DSWD, PSA's National Census 2020, that, of course, we've all been holding our breaths for a long, long time, delayed by COVID. So all these issues keep rising because we have different data, and most of it's really rather old. So may I know how the RSBSA will comply with the Secretary Jokno's mandate that ayuda should no longer be general and shotgun, but more importantly, focused, targeted, and properly monitored.
Yeah, let me take a first crack, Madam Chair. First, the farm registry that I think you're referring to earlier was, my recollection is that that was first initiated during during our time in the Aquino administration, where the farm registry, because then the budget secretary did not trust much about the data that exists in the Department of Agriculture, and so they just had to gather a different set of data. But that effort was not sustained and was never, that registry was not, to my recollection, was not updated. On the other hand, there is a periodic census of agriculture that's done once every 10 years, unfortunately, and it coincides with the conduct of similar censuses around the world, censuses of agriculture. Okay, and for now, we are doing this so-called community-based monitoring system. It's a nationwide effort to.
Are you referring, sir, to the DILG effort?
The DILG, that's part of the DILG, no? PSA, that's an effort of the Philippine Statistics Authority.
The PSA. That's the PSA. Kasi meron rin yung DILG eh.
Yes, yes.
Kaya medyo gulong-gulo na kami, tapos parating may problema kung family ba yan o household income. So, kung gusto natin targeted, ang katotohanan, it will live and die by the lists provided. Hindi po ba? Ang problema, walang listahan na maaayos, lalo na sa informal sector, sabog-sabog.
Correct nga. That's why we think that by ramping up this PhilID, the national ID system, there will be only one ID that whether it's a DISWD or DILG, we will be using only one system, and the goal is to have 50 million already individuals by the end of this year, and we are on target. By the first half of next year, the end of the second half of next year, we should have completed already 92 million, and the rest will be done for the rest of the year. So that's the timeline that we have, and I think that once we have that, all these issues about
But Manong
different.
RC, what's the update on the 2020 census? Kasi na-COVID pati yung census taking natin, di po ba?
Yeah, I think that we are scheduled, if I recall, we have done.
Others, Dennis. Yeah.
It's done. So, but has it been released? It's done, Madam Mr. Chair.
Is there a better way of bringing all of this together?
Yeah.
I'm in full agreement with Secretary Jokno that we should have targeted assistance and social protection. Kaya nga lang, wala nga mga listahan, iba-iba eh. Every department seems to embark on its own listing. And then turn around and accuses the local government for politicizing the list. But in truth, the lists are so poor and so outdated and incomplete. Paano kaya yan? Pwede ba i-align yung listahan ng DSWD, yung PSA, yung RSBSA na ginagamit ng DA, pati yung bagong listahan na naman ng coconut levy beneficiaries? Is there a way to finally
Yeah.
bring all of this together and determine if it's finally household or family? What is the real median for poverty and so on and so forth?
Yes, our priority, Mr. Chair, is to cover the SWD listahan and the farmer registry. That's the priority for the digitalization of the PhilSys, the PSA, the national ID system, and along with that, this effort to produce a community-based monitoring system. We have covered already 6 million households that amount to, or represent about 28 million individuals for 5th and 6th class municipalities. We have included in our budget proposal for the expansion of the CBMS to cover the entire country, and we hope to get the funding for that.
Perhaps the economic managers could remind all our department heads that we should really come up with the generalized and centralized listing once and for all para hindi na tayo mahirapan lagi.
I think, Your Honor, as a general rule, the user of the data should not be the generator of the data. I think it should be PSA. Okay.
Kasi yung RSBSA, DA ang nagge-generate eh. Tapos sila rin magdi-distribute. Kaya nakakatuwa na eh. Right. It's entirely self-serving. That's the concern. So we'd like the PSA to ratchet up its efforts. Maybe we should add its budget kasi iilan lang naman yung mga lolang natitira ron. De, biro lang. Si Dennis di naman lola. Okay lang. Okay, following up though on the RSBSA of the DA, are there any items in the GAA that we can point to as directly addressing the food shortages that have alarmed our people? Marami siyempre sa DA, ang dami-daming programa sa DA, pero yung direktang sumasagot sa problema ng food shortage, at least may maipakita tayo. I suppose it's food shortages as well as
Yes,
high
ma'am.
prices of food.
We have the national rice program.
We have a food security program po under the GAA. And
It's the same old
items po-
one.
Yes
That's
po.
always been there for the
It's,
past 2
for
decades. at
the
very
National
least.
Rice Program, it's the
It's
budget.
the same old
increase-
one also, dear.
Yes, ma'am. National Rice Program, Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, National Corn Program.
Yes, I know them by heart as well.
Similar projects and programs po as submitted by the
Yes,
Department
but-
of Agriculture.
But what we're encountering is not business as usual. Certainly, we can rise to the challenge of this high inflation and these shortages. Ano ba maipakita natin? Kasi ito pareho rin naman eh.
Yes, ma'am, but
Wala namang
but
pinagbago.
Mr. Chair, but the levels now are doubled, or they increase the levels of the projects and programs po.
I think we know very well that the problem with DA is not lack of budget. DBM and the economic managers been very, very generous. But truth of the matter is, it's not being spent. We know the money remains with the BSWM. We know that there is a lot of money still with the Philippine Coconut Authority. Ang dami-daming ahensya, pati PhilMec, ang kanilang disbursement nasa 20%. So, ibig ko sabihin, hindi naman ginagastos eh. So, yung gusto namin makita, yung talagang nakatumbok dun sa shortage at saka sa inflationary prices. Yun ang problema kasi it looks too much like business as usual and you're doubling the problem of non-utilization, di ba?
That was the subject of our cabinet meeting last week and it's really an all of government approach because you have to talk of transport, right? How do you get from the farm to the market? And so we also talk of power. We have to provide power. We have to talk about water. So it's really an all of government approach, and we're doing something about that. We will design a roadmap, also public works projects. Okay, so we are doing something about that, ma'am.
I think what I'm looking for are more specific projects such as the Kadiwa distribution program, for example, the revitalization of the FTI, and so on. Not a mere doubling of the NFA budget, because we already know that that agency has had a history of corruption and inefficiency that we don't want to double in the future or repeat. So, yun yata hinahanap ko, yung talaga nakatumbok doon sa inflation at yung shortage. Yung mga kadiwa, yung distribution issues natin, for example, sa pork, sa Mindanao, dami-daming baboy, hindi naman madala sa Manila, pagkat yung presyo pagkamahal-mahal. I guess that's what I'm looking for. Yung specific, maipakita natin sa tao, ito ang gagawin. Wala yata kasing ganun. It's so much business as usual. Yun lang. Kung pwede sana na maka-carve out tayo sa dinami-dami ng programa ng DA, yung iilan na talagang nakatumbok dun sa problemang hinaharap ng tao ngayon.
We will sit down with DA and then ask them. Maybe when they go here for the budget deliberation, we can also perhaps ask them for their defined projects and programs and how to implement the budget that we.
Sino ba sekretary ng DA?
Sabi,
Sino ba sekretary?
ading ko. Ading ko.
Yeah.
Papatukan ko.
May I
Okay.
add, I think
Joke lang.
if I may,
Hindi, kasi ang problema talaga, napakadaming programa ng DA na hindi naman nagagastos ang pera. Naalarma ako sa reaction ng DBM na ang ginawa, dinoble yung budget ng napakaraming programa. Bakit yung doblehin samantalang marami doon? Hindi nga nagagastos, sayang lang.
Ma'am, perhaps
I-
po, Mr. Chair, with the new leadership of Department of Agriculture,
That's
they'll be able to disperse and absorb the
Yeah, ayusin
levels
na
that we have
natin.
provided.
so if I may,
Yes,
Madam
Apo.
Chair, that the intention also is to change even if the same program, but the composition of the program has to change. For example, there's a good deal of emphasis on the value chain.
Right.
It's a rice program, but we focus on the logistics and the value chain along that one, so that. Because what you see now is the farm price is so low, the consumer price is so high, and it's something is lost in between because of that very
Yes,
complex.
between the prices of diesel and the price or shortage
Yeah.
of fertilizer,
Yeah, and-
distribution's hardly a problem po because there's nothing to distribute. Walang nagtanim eh.
It's a chicken and egg ho dahil siguro walang may distribute dahil kulang na yung but the other one is extraordinary ang year nito because a big part of the TRICE program is going to be the subsidy for the fertilizer because napakataas ang fertilizer cost ngayon, as we know, if the
Sana there was an accompanying subsidy also for diesel.
so that's the
Lalo na sa fishing sector po. In any case, there's also another challenge, I think, that faces us in agriculture, and that's water, no? So the issue of projects that are dedicated to irrigation and also potable water. Your thoughts on the much mooted bills on the Department of Water?
The department, if I may po, Mr. Chair, and of course you may want.
We will support the Department of Water. It's part of that has been an identified priority for so many years, and as of now, there is really it's so complex system. It's real. You really need a kind of an apex organization that takes care of the
That's right.
issue. Yeah.
Opo, but Ilocano style po, ang aking pre-propose water authority lamang. Kasi takot ako maubos na naman sa sahod ng sangkatutak na USEC at ASEC yung budget na maibibigay sa department na bago.
Yes,
Pwede
ma'am.
tayong mag-abulis ng iba ho.
No, in the meantime po, while we don't have the law, as discussed during the cabinet po, it will be, Secretary Tony will assign one undersecretary who will look into the water issues po, as it was discussed under DNR po.
Okay,
During the
yes,
cabinet po, it was
DNR.
discussed.
Pero sabog-sabog siya eh.
Opo,
Yung
so
flood
siya po
control
yung-
nasa Public Works, tapos may BSWM na nasa DA, tapos may mga luwa pa, may mga nawasa pa. Ang dami-dami kasing water agencies. As we know, there are upwards of 42, I think. So these are the things that we need to look at.
Right
Talagang
sizing.
kinakailangan ng overhaul nitong lahat na ito. Maraming salamat. That's it, Apo Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Amy. As I will go to give Senator Mark a chance, and then I think we can suspend already after that.
Yes,
Go.
thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Anyway, there's always tomorrow. I think I don't know if, but anyway, I just wanted to use this.
In fairness to Senator Mark, he wanted to already adjourn the hearing. No. After you, I mean, after you, Senator Amy. No, he wanted after Senator Amy to already let naawa siya sa mga sekretary actually. But I told him I also wanted to do that, but some of our colleagues made a reservation for tomorrow. So I hope you understand because we had announced that there would be 2 days. So we'll just request you to come back. But I think because you did so well answering questions today, I think there'll just be a few more tomorrow, and we can end earlier, or we can have a shorter session. So, begging your indulgence, Sen. Mark.
I just want to take this opportunity to commend my colleagues in the economic team for drafting such a comprehensive and responsive budget. You know, I've been on that side, and when I came in earlier, I almost went to that side. I'm so used to it. So, muntik na. But again, I know how hard you work to make this budget, and I'd just like to say thank you very much for staying here until past 3. I was online at 9 o'clock, and you were already here answering questions. You know that
They've been here almost 6.5 hours.
I did that once, and I was in a hearing once for 5 hours. I did not look that fresh. So my compliments to all of you after 5 hours. So I just like to thank you. I'd like to thank you for your hard work. You know, it's very. I know all the work that goes into this budget. So, behalf of the Senate, I'm sure behalf of the committee and the Senate, I'd like to thank you all very much, and for giving us the opportunity to be able to ask you about the budget. So, I guess I just want that's all, Chairman. And if there's no other things, I can move
Please make the most
to suspend.
Yeah,
And so I'd like to move to suspend.
I second.
Yeah, it's moved and seconded. I don't think there's any objection. We're similarly exhausted on this side of the table. So we'd like to thank Sec Ben, Sec Mina, Sec RC, Board Member Bruce, and the members of the economic team, the heads of the agencies, their undersecretaries. Salamat po. We'll resume tomorrow at 1 o'clock p.m. Thank you very much for very patiently and diligently answering our questions. Salamat po.